There's got to be more than this. If you've ever caught yourself asking yourself that in the middle of a meeting on a Sunday night or a Monday morning, or while staring at your to-do list, you're not alone, and you don't have to stay stuck.
What Matters to You by Greta Bradman is your roadmap off that treadmill. Greta's a registered psychologist whose work spans clinical, coaching and performance psychology. She's helped leaders and teams and even designed scalable tech solutions so people can make value-based choices and live with real meaning.
In today's episode, we'll tap into Greta's dual lives as a psychologist and a top-selling classical singer to uncover how important it is to identify not just your core values, but also your threat-based values. Kate?
Hi, Shayla.
Very excited for Outlawbrary number 3. See how good we're getting at saying that word now?
How much do I regret coming up with a cute little name for this book club? Outlawbrary. Book club number 3.
Yeah, book club. Outlaw's book club. I'm actually really excited about this book. It was maybe a couple of months ago, maybe a little bit longer actually, that I read it. And then in preparation for today, I went back and read it a bit more, and I thought to myself, yes, I really like this book. There's just gems throughout it everywhere. So much little bits of wisdom, so many things that I think resonate or will resonate with so many people.
Yeah, and it's quite a meaty book as well. You can tell she's a clinical psychologist. There's a real scientific rigor actually to what she's saying. For me, and you said it in the introduction too, for me, the most significant thing I took away from this book was, one, that values guide us, and that knowing what our values are and tuning into them so we can make decisions in accordance with our values. That's obviously a really important point. But the other thing was this notion of the threat-based values versus the personal values. And that was a really big eye-opener for me. I hadn't thought about it like that. And when she was talking about them or writing about them, I was, well, as Oprah would say, it was a big aha moment for me.
Yeah, I agree. I also hadn't thought about the fact that there might be two sets of values that you have. And I think people often struggle to connect with their values at particular times, which is obviously when you're under threat. And it's at those moments that you sort of revert, really, and you just can't hold on to them. And so you might make decisions that down the line you think, oh, why did I decide that? So I felt like it was a really useful idea.
I was going to say too, I think the threat-based values, she actually names some of the common threat-based values.
Yeah.
So like you said too, and I've actually been doing, coincidentally, some coaching recently, some ADHD coaching actually, because spoiler alert, I'm a late diagnosed person with ADHD, and that diagnosis has changed my life for the better, knowing what it is and knowing that somehow my brain works in a slightly different way from the neurotypical, whatever that means. So I'm doing some coaching around that at the moment. And one of the things that we've been looking at is values. So it was very good timing for me in the context of reading this book. But what I liked so much about the threat-based values was, one, I hadn't ever thought of it like that. I was very familiar with that values work, hadn't ever really sat down and done it, but have been doing it recently. But the threat-based values, you can name them too. So typically with the values, there's a list and you kind of go through and you sort of feel the ones that resonate with you. But I'd never seen a threat-based value list. No. And that's what she does.
When I read over this again the other day in preparation for this, the first few pages in the introduction actually, I just read it and thought, oh, yes, this book is so great. And I just wanted to read out a couple of things from it. So the very first part of the introduction says, do you feel pressured to align your identity with society's version of normal and enough? And I just thought, yep, bang, everyone does that. Everyone is constantly doing that.
Well, the whole point of this podcast, is it?
Exactly. The constant self-scrutiny, that externally derived expectations, the shoulds, foist upon you can leave you questioning if you're good enough, successful enough, unique enough, conforming enough. Just again, like bang, it just kind of hits you straight away. And then she talks about this throughout the book, these idea of these sort of the whispers, I guess, that are in your mind. She talks about there being a commonality amongst all of the clients that she's worked with, and she describes it like this: a quiet voice that holds a common musing. At times, it's expressed as a whisper, apologetically. Sometimes it comes with a question mark. It's been so frayed by experience. And other times there's an exclamation mark that follows it and no whisper at all. It links to a desire to become more connected with what matters, whether the person knows what matters most to them yet or not. If I had to sum up the musing, it's this: there's got to be more than this. Bang. I just feel like bang. That's what everyone's thinking when they're struggling with life, when they're struggling with work, and you just feel like, here I am on this same treadmill over and over again.
So I guess her basic premise is values, tuning into what your values are. Is a better way to make decisions about small things, how you spend your time, and the bigger things as well. And I think that's probably something that's very familiar to people as well. But is that concept of the threat-based values, that identifying those and working out when you're under pressure, what you're reverting to without thinking about it. So I think those two sides to me are very important. That values matter. Tuning into what your values are, consciously doing it, is actually a very important exercise. And again, it's a very odd thing because, as I said, I've just been doing it, and really you're presented with a list of words and asked to get quiet, just like give me a task I can actually do, right?
Yes, just
Quieten my mind. Sorry, that's the whole reason I've got to coaching, right? But anyway, but it's reading through this list slowly and feeling which ones resonate with you. And actually, that sounds like an odd woo-woo kind of thing. It was actually really the way to do it, because some words just resonate because you actually almost have a physical sensation in relation to some of those words.
What I really liked actually is that at the back she has some common generic core values, which I found really useful to kind of, as you say, scan through the list. They're very accessible, easy to understand. She gives some examples in the book about different ways in which her clients have interpreted some of these, which was also quite useful for me. For example, I ended up choosing adventure as one of mine, which is not one that I would have thought about previously. For example, my family are always hassling me that, don't like going on roller coasters or, anything kind of exciting like that. Couldn't think of any word.
That's your madness value, not your adventure value. But to me, I go, of course you're adventurous. You took a year out and went to France.
Yeah. And
You've done some really adventurous things. So that surprises me that you're surprised.
Yeah, well, I think I just always, had in my head that I'm pretty boring actually. But when I thought about it, I realized that some of the things that I've done and some of the jobs that I've taken because, it felt like a bit of an adventure. So, so I found that really useful to go through it and to be able to reset some of those in my head as well, that maybe people might think about them differently than, because I think some often are quite obvious, things like, I don't know, family and integrity. Some of these, they're almost inherent or innate values that I guess they do drive what it is that I do, but they're so inherent that you don't really think about them as you're doing it, I suppose. Whereas in fact, some of the other ones that I was able to identify, adventure, for example, that's really useful for me, because when I'm thinking about doing something, I can go, oh, does that feel adventurous? Does that attend to my need for adventure? And yes or no is then the answer. So I think it's...
Other ones?
What were my other ones?
Yeah, what were your other? I'm curious to know what your... actually, it's funny because curiosity is one of mine. What I've just said. I'm curious to know what your other ones are.
So curiosity was one, and the other one was connection and community.
Oh, okay.
Which is why I love the Facebook group that we've got slowly growing for the podcast, because I just love hearing from people. And again, when I think about other things that I've done, not necessarily in my career, but outside of my career, at my kids' school, for example, we built a big community and built a big nature play area. And those are the things that I absolutely love doing. So, it was really, I wouldn't have, I just think, and maybe it was just the fact that I'm now in the right time to be thinking about this, but I don't think they would have been values that I would have attributed to myself previously.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely do your core values first. I think it's important, but then I completely agree. Then the standout part of this book is understanding that we have threat-based values, and when it is, she does a really great discussion of when they tend to come out, and then also tells you what some of the threat-based values might be.
Yeah. Ooh, I found that so important. So you have two sets of values, not one. Based on your current needs and whether you feel under threat, you're likely to prioritize one type or the other, thriving or surviving. So the core values are the ones that sort of we are positive, sort of not aspirational, but the ones that we should aspire to, I think. So that probably does by definition make them aspirational. But in any event,
well, when we're feeling safe and secure,
yeah,
I think they're the ones that we
yeah,
can more easily relate to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the threat-based values are when you are feeling under threat, right? So, and when she sort of names them, she talks about, I tell you what, some of them I was like, oh, can relate, can relate. What are the threat-based values? So the threat-based values that Greta Bradman talks about, one is authority. So then when you tend to focus on respect for hierarchy and adherence to established rules, avoidance, tendency to steer clear of potential threats, discomfort, or difficult situations. That's one of mine. That's a big one for me. Blame deflection, that's pretty obvious. Control, health, which is a heightened concern about your own well-being. Hypervigilance, which is an intense awareness of potential threats or dangers. In-group loyalty, so an excessive focus on loyalty to one's own group. Perfectionism, can relate. The drive to avoid mistakes and ensure flawless results, often out of fear of criticism or perceived inadequacy. Risk avoidance, so minimizing exposure to perceived danger. Security, an overemphasis on safety and protection from threats. Self-focus, a heightened preoccupation with one's own needs. Self-preservation, a focus on protecting oneself from harm or loss through overly cautious or defensive behaviors. And stability and order, a desire for predictability and structured routines. So like with the core-based values, there's obviously some similarities between the words, but they do have slightly different meanings.
So what would you say your top three are?
Top three, well, certainly avoidance, because I will tend to retreat from things. So I don't really want to have fights with people, and I don't really want to, I prefer to get along with people if at all possible. To quote that Rudyard Kipling line, as far as possible without surrender. But I think sometimes too, I will just remove myself from things that I'm finding difficult or uncomfortable and won't engage in a conversation about things when perhaps I should. I'll just tend to, like Homer Simpson disappearing into the hedge. I'll just do that a bit. Certainly perfectionism. Hello. I've got to rewrite something before it goes off, like say an article or something like that. And often I'm so caught up in the perfectionism, I won't do it because I'm like, I don't know if I can do it well enough, or it's not going to be, it's not going to set the world on fire. That's pretty straightforward. Another one, I tend to, I don't know, security, stability, probably, I would say.
I was going to put to you, if you didn't come up with security, that might be one, because I think when you were going through that process of jobs and you felt drawn back to what it was that you knew, that felt a little bit like it was that security and stability.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah. And actually, as we discussed on the podcast, there was a nagging little feeling. And I knew that wasn't quite right. I mean, it was hinting at what the right thing was, but it wasn't the right thing. And I sort of knew it, but no, it was that desire to retreat into what I knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, this is exactly what she talks about in this book, is essentially these two sort of voices that you have, which are your values. So there's a voice that's telling you about your values, and then there's the other voice, which is your threat-based value. And so your threat-based values, I think, were pulling you in the direction of, no, I should do that. That's what I know, and that's safe, and that's secure. And the other voice was trying to pull you back to your other values. I think that was what the tension was there. That's what it felt like to me from the outside looking in
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah.
I think that's very wise. Perhaps wisdom is one of your core values.
I don't think so. But I think my threat-based values, this was just such an interesting exercise. So I think one of mine is hypervigilance, control everything, and if I control everything, then I can stop bad things from happening. So that certainly
Is
happens
that
for me.
control or is that hypervigilance? So hypervigilance is more kind of like alert to every potential threat. So you can
Yes.
control it, or I mean, I guess again, I think there is overlap between these, right?
So I think they feel certainly very similar to me. So I become hyper vigilant where I'm looking out for things all of the time so that I can put checks in place to make sure that everything is under control. So kind of maybe one flows from the other. And how she describes that is an intense awareness of potential threats or dangers driven by the belief that constant attention is necessary for safety. So I can definitely relate to that. I've also underlined perfectionism. I wonder if there's anyone that doesn't underline perfectionism. Surely that's like almost everyone, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe it's just the people that we hang around with because we hang around with too many lawyers, but it feels like to me, you know, so the drive to avoid mistakes and ensure flawless results, often out of fear of criticism or perceived inadequacy. I think that the way that that manifests, for example, if you're thinking about careers and changing careers or trying different things, is that you just won't try new things. You won't go and apply for a job because you think that you don't tick all of the selection criteria that someone says that they need for that job. That's what I think it looks like in the career space. And so then it means that you can end up just staying in the same thing. You feel like you're not going to be perfect at the thing that you want to try.
Yeah. And I think so it's sort of not actually getting things done because the fear of not doing a good enough or a perfect job. So I think but it is a safety mechanism. It's kind of hiding in it's not actually getting things out for criticism. But so it is actually a procrastination tool in a way, isn't it? Perfectionism, I think, a fear of doing it. And then there's that expression that I love, and I think it's a fairly ubiquitous. I don't know if anyone in particular said it or everyone said it. Done is better than perfect.
Yes.
Right. But we all know that. But when we're under threat, of course, that's when we're retreating.
But I think that once you identify them, it then becomes that when you find yourself in that situation, you go, oh, no, we've activated a threat-based value here. Let's wind back. How do we get back to our other ones? And I'm going to give you an example, which is not a work example, but which is a life example. I learn French. I have a French lesson once a week. I am, I suppose, like every other language learner, not perfect. That's the idea, right? You're trying to learn something new. But I find it incredibly uncomfortable, and it's taken me huge amounts of work to be able to go along to a French lesson and not just actually want to run out of the room.
Yeah.
And I want to learn French. I love learning French. I want to be able to speak French better than I can. But when I'm in there and people are asking me questions and I know I'm not going to answer it perfectly, I know there's going to be some problem with my grammar, all of those things. All I want to do is actually just crawl up in a ball and climb under the table and just kind of go, which I think is this. Yeah, exactly. Which I think is this,
Is that avoidant?
well, I think it's self-preservation. It feels like self-preservation, which I think kind of comes from perfectionism. And people, my teacher and other people will say to me, you don't need to be perfect, you're learning. That's actually what this is about. If you don't make errors, then how can you learn? And
may I interject with what happened when we had a meeting this week? There was two French guys at a table nearby, and we wanted to take a photo. So from having been at the meeting, and we were taking a selfie. And then I was saying, no, go ask them in French. Go ask them in French to take our photo. And Shayla did. And what did that guy say? He was like, "Oh, your French is so good."
Well, so I'll tell you the second part of that story. He was very kind, and I said to him, "Thank you, you're very kind." And then I had my French lesson that afternoon, and I told her that I had been brave enough to, say in French, "Could you please take a photo of us?" And I told her what I'd said, and she said, "Oh, you didn't say it right." I thought, And straight away, that little, gremlin of, see, that's why. When Kate was saying to you, say it in French, and I was going, no, I shouldn't say it in French. Anyway, it was very minor, and clearly he didn't notice it. But that's
Maybe it's your teacher that's the perfectionist and not you.
no, she's lovely. She's lovely. I'm definitely the problem.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, what is Greta Bradman, who is, yes, that name might sound familiar to you because she does say that she is related to a particularly famous Bradman. Don Bradman, obviously, was her grandfather. So, it's when you feel the name sounds familiar for some reason, it's not a coincidence. So, and what she says to do, I think, is that sort of awareness, building in that pause between feeling it and trying to name it, and I guess that takes practice, right? But going through the process, I think, of what your threat-based values might be, and in the same way, knowing what your core-based values are, because that's also helpful for decisions. Knowing what they are and identifying them is really helpful, so you can at least perhaps start to become more aware of when you are under threat and you're reverting to behaviors that don't necessarily serve you. I think is really powerful, because it might just pop up in your head next time you do something and think, hang on, am I just being, well, for me, as I said, I think my biggest one is avoidant, is going, but naming them is powerful. Just knowing what the ones you might be reverting to are. I think she makes the point too, I think, about, again, it's just sort of building space. So if you can identify your values, both your threat-based and your core-based values, that when you might get used to thinking about them and being aware of them, and next time you're in a position where you think you're responding to a threat, there might just be something that taps on your noggin and says, hang on, isn't that avoidant? Isn't that a threat-based value?
And honestly, I feel like I've got better at that. The fact that I even asked that guy in French the other day, I would not have done that 12 months ago. No chance ever. No chance. I just would have gone, yeah, yeah, we're not doing that. And I think I said to you initially, no, I'm not doing it. And you said, no, you should. And I thought, oh yeah, here's what's happening here. And so I have become reflective enough to be able to go, okay, yeah, it's probably not going to be perfect. He's still definitely going to be able to understand it. He's probably going to be quite happy with the fact that it's imperfect, and anyway, maybe you'll learn something. And so I have been able to, I think, build that in. And one of the things that she says in the book here is, she says you need to inaction threat-based values more often, so that when they pop up, you go, no, we're not taking any action with those. Thanks. I can see that they're there. Off you go. So I really like that. Just and I agree with you. It's about reflection. But the first thing is that you've got to know when they're happening,
Right.
so that you can then go, no, I'm not going to pay attention to that. So I just think it's really useful.
It's incredibly powerful. And I think for me, as I said, the values stuff is stuff I've heard before, but good to be reminded of. And by having done this exercise separately, and then reading this book at the same time, I found it really, really helpful. I think, well, like you, and just, I don't think I said what mine were, and I'm still kind of working out my top three, but they all kind of coalesced around certain themes. So as I said, calm, harmony, tranquility, that kind of thing was important. I had autonomy, freedom, independence, those kind of ones as well. And I think I settled on autonomy as probably one of my key values, because that is really important to me. And the other ones I had were family, obviously. And if I had to name one, obviously for me, I've made decisions, certainly career decisions, based on what works for my children, particularly, The other ones for me, and hopefully people would not be listening going, really, kindness, compassion, empathy, those things are really important to me.
Those two in particular feel, again, a little bit inherent to me. Integrity, compassion, and kindness. I hope that I would just do that all of the time. And so I think, I don't know, it's such a great list. I think there's so many different ones on there, but I think the ones that felt most useful for me were the ones that felt less inherent. I would argue that even when I'm feeling threat-based, I would still have integrity and be kind and compassionate, whereas I think maybe some of the other ones.
No, that's out the door, man. No, you're right. I think that's right. That, well, you would be aiming for that, whether because if you're under stress,
Yeah.
no,
Whereas I feel like some of the others, for example, adventure, if we go back to adventure, when I'm feeling under threat, I ditch that quite quickly. Whereas
right.
I don't ditch integrity. I
Yeah,
don't ditch kindness.
yeah.
Again, I hope other people would agree
Or
with that.
so
But
you would have us believe, Shayla. Yes,
exactly.
actually, and I was going to say, actually, I think that's a really important point, because you're right. I mean, to me, family is so core: compassion, empathy, kindness, integrity, those kind of things. And the other one for me was curiosity.
Yeah.
So that sort of always finding other things interesting. To be honest with you, too, I go, that's a little bit ADHD too. Um, so because I do
Shiny new thing.
yeah, well, yeah, but I do find so many things really interesting,
Hmm.
and choosing between them um, is really
Yeah.
hard sometimes, and overcommitting is a problem, because so many things can be interesting, but then curiosity is a good thing, right? Because it
Yeah.
will lead
Absolutely.
me to saying yes to a podcast, for instance.
Exactly right.
When
We've
I'm
talked about this ad infinitum. Luckily that you don't say no to things. Lucky that you're curious, else we might not be here.
as I was like, oh, I've never done a podcast before. That could be, yeah, that sounds interesting. Oh, that could be. Yeah. But then again, it ties into meaning, because I think there's a lot of stuff I've accumulated over the years of teaching that I think need to be discussed. So there's that too.
The next thing I wanted to talk about is is the very important chapter 6, called Shoulds,
Mhm.
Being Enough, and the Imposter Experience.
Oh, here we go again.
I
This is,
know.
you're targeting me on this, aren't you? You're saying I'm
No.
an imposter, aren't you? No, because I am. I am. Shayla, I am.
But
You
you and
heard
I
it here
just
first on the Outlaws podcast.
but you and I are constantly still talking about the shoulds, right? The things that we think that we should do.
Yeah, and how we had to coach each other through not
Yes.
applying for something.
Yes. Just last
Yep,
week. Yeah.
yep, just
So
last week.
so
And we told you we didn't have the answers, anyone listening to this. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're not
that's
kidding. We really are living this in real time.
exactly. So I really enjoy this chapter because it really talks about all of these issues that I think people come up against all of the time. So I think what she does here in the book is she links the shoulding
Uh-huh.
to the imposter
To should. Is that a verb?
experience. Yeah, it's a Shayla verb.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
No, just checking, just
Yeah,
checking.
yeah. It's a
I wasn't
Shayla
familiar
verb.
with it.
If you look in the dictionary, you will see under Shayla verbs shoulding.
Uh-huh, okay, okay.
Surely someone's written a book called Shoulding. Like,
And if not, why not? And we
ex-
shoulding.
exactly, done. So she links shoulding to the imposter experience. So she says the imposter experience involves a particular variety of should, where we perceive ourselves as less than what is needed to be the real deal. Again, if only I could be so articulate.
Right.
The person we see in the mirror doesn't align with the idealized version of self that would be qualified to do a certain task. And so that's essentially what she's saying
Mm.
that being an imposter is. And she says here, you can think of the fundamental characteristics that keep the imposter experience going as safety behaviours, which the imposter engages in to avoid being unmasked. And again, like I feel all of the shoulds. So should we apply for that job? Should we do this thing? Again, just all comes down to because we're trying to reach something that other people have suggested we should reach.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity for us to prove that we can do things and are therefore good enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Because on some level, we're like, oh, but just doing what we've done is not enough.
enough.
And it's
Yeah.
crazy, isn't it, really? Because I certainly know from you, and people say this to me too. Oh, but you've done this and you've done that, and how can you feel like an imposter when? But I'm like, well, but I haven't done that, that, or that.
And I wonder if anyone ever feels like, I don't know. I guess there's a subset of the population, maybe the ones that aren't perfectionists, but who feel like they're not imposters. I just don't know that it ever really goes away,
No.
ever, for anyone.
No, it probably doesn't. And that in itself is good to know too, that if everyone feels that they're an imposter, then there aren't any imposters. If we're all imposters, then none of us are.
Yeah, it's a universal condition.
Mm.
As I say, maybe there are some people. It says here in the book that 70% of adults are thought to experience imposter syndrome. So
Wow.
I'd like to meet one of the 30%, to be
I was
honest
just
with you.
thinking that too. I was like, who 30%? Really? Again, it depends on who you're hanging out with.
I'm not hanging out with any of them, I don't reckon.
No.
Yeah, don't know who they are. It would be really interesting, I think, too. I don't know. Oh, yeah, she does. She does reference the where that data's from. So it'd be interesting to go and read that study and see if they drew any further conclusions about who the 30% were and how it was that they've managed to get into that space.
I'd love to interview one.
Yeah.
Putting out a call. If you don't feel like you're an imposter, if you actually genuinely feel like you're validly where you need to be and have not somehow fooled everyone into thinking you're competent, then we would like to hear from you, and we would like you to come on the podcast because you are a psychological aberration.
There's a few world leaders who we might be getting applications from, I think.
I was going to say, funnily enough, a couple come to mind. 3, in fact.
Yeah, exactly. And so the final point that I just want to make about what she says about the imposter syndrome is that she says it causes the gradual deviation between the choices you make and the value-based life that you seek to grow for yourself. So she's saying it really is quite causative, in meaning that even though you've identified your values and you've identified the things that you want to prioritize, that actually these shoulds and these imposter syndromes are just making you deviate from that course. So yeah, she's saying it keeps you in a cycle of threat. So where you're always attending to those threat-based values is what she's saying happens. So
yeah.
So yeah, great chapter. I really enjoyed that chapter.
Really good.
Yeah.
Overall, I did find this to be such an important book, actually.
Yeah. And the other thing that I just did want to also mention before we go is that there's lots of quite practical activities in here. So she suggests ways in which you can answer the questions or you can think about the things, which I think is always quite good, because sometimes you read these kind of books and you go, oh, that's great. How do I actually do that? But there's lots of really useful and practical activities in there. So, and some really good sort of checklists. So one here is the indicators of core values misalignment. So some things that might be popping up if your values are maybe misaligned. So yeah, I think overall, there's some great outlaw concepts in the book, but it's also very, very good in terms of practically helping you to figure out some of the questions as well.
Outlaw, know thyself.
Quite right.
Because the greater self-knowledge we have, then it does make it possible then to start thinking about what is it that I do want? Is it she has a good chapter on values in the workplace too. And it might be just a misalignment of you and your particular workplace. It doesn't necessarily mean that the whole profession for you is not something you want to be in, whatever that profession might be, whether it's law or journalism or medicine or whatever it is that you're in at the moment. But I liked her practical takeaway, and I'm going to try and implement this because she says you can prime yourself for daily values-based living by making time for regular reflection on your values. And she says, as you sip a morning coffee or tea or water, a quick reflection on one of your values that you seek to bring into your day and how you might action it in some teeny way as soon as you put down your cup can prime you to notice that throughout the morning. And I just think, that's such a great thing to suggest, because you're going to connect it to your cup of coffee. And if that's a really easy way to do it, just to reflect on them and think about, what is my day looking like? How can I do that? Because that is what you're going to do at that point anyway. To introduce that concept, I thought was really a very powerful suggestion to tie it to something we're doing every day anyway.
I feel like that's meditation for non-meditators, in fact. Yeah.
Yes, it is, but it's meditation, but call it something non-scary.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's just drinking coffee.
Right.
Which we can all do. Mostly. Yeah.
Certainly can. No, that's right. Or tea or whatever, but connecting it to something rather than flicking straight to emails or online newspaper or whatever it is you do. She does say that throughout the book too, that first sip, just pause.
Yeah.
Connect the values and think about your day. So if you are thinking about your day ahead, that's a great time to be sort of doing it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So it's a smart book, a really smart book, a thorough book.
Yeah. I did actually message her and ask her if she would come onto the podcast to talk about, she ignored me. So, but I
We don't
actually feel
mind.
like
We understand.
she is a bit of an outlaw in that she's a psychologist, and she's also got this, I'm not sure what the timeline was in terms of the singing career, the classical career. I like the outlawness of it in that she has this profession, but then she also has this other profession as a singer, and obviously both of them attend to her different values and allows her to feel balanced. So it'd be great if she's
And
listening, you know.
yes, thank you. And also too, 3 cheers for the neurodivergent, because she also talks about her own autism diagnosis and again, and about realizing that, oh, actually, that's why my brain works this way.
Yeah.
Which was, she said, a very powerful revelation for her. Likewise, I can relate, like many people can. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it too. So I would highly recommend it. It's
Great
a
book.
very powerful book, I think. Really
Yeah.
worth reading.
So thanks for listening today to Outlawbrary number 3. Kate, can you say the word now? No. She made up the word. She can't say the word.
I
I'm
don't
left
know.
with it.
And we'll get to that when we have another semi-regular series coming soon that Shayla's actually vetoed. My suggestion, much easier to say, but fair enough, perhaps by coining Outlawbrary, I have lost the right to name other semi-regular series.
Yeah, I think it's possible. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us. As always, we love it when you give us feedback. So please do that wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. Drop us an email, contact@outlawspodcast.com. If you've got different ideas or topics or books or anything really that you'd like to hear us chatting about, guests, anything, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.